tell us more about the internal response.
Yeah.
Like when
Mhm.
situations are happening or something's coming up, what's the internal response that's associated with empathy?
Sure.
Or that is
So,
empathy.
yeah, that is empathy. So, it's an internal cognitive and affective response, right? So, we sort of have three pieces of empathy here. We have the cognitive, that's in easiest terms, it's perspective taking and even a little bit more beyond that. Then we have affective empathy, which is our ability to resonate with others' emotions, to have a visceral experience. And then we have the empathic action, that's the external response. But that internal response, it's a dual process that happens. And some people are better at one than the other. Some have more skills in one category than the other. But some might have deficits in both categories. You know, of all the assessments and tests that I've done in the research, outside of the research, with my assessment, with other assessments, I've never come across someone who didn't have any empathy. But what you'll often see is there's deficits in their cognitive and affective empathy that's leading to a deficit in the kind of external response.
Could you give an example of both of those just so people have a better idea, cognitive versus affective, and then how that shows up
Yes.
in action?
Yes. I know once I start getting into this, it can get wordy. So I'm sorry. I've worked so hard to try to move away from theory and into examples or better language. So please forgive me. Sometimes that
No,
can be
you're good.
very
Yeah, it's the
theory
hardest thing,
heavy.
isn't it?
It is. It really, especially once you have to spend so much time in grad school, doing all of this academic language, and then you get out in the real world and it's like, how do I talk? How do I
Hmm.
explain this? So, you know, so when we talk about cognitive empathy, it's really perspective taking. Can I understand this person's point of view? But can I also put myself in their shoes? And this part of cognitive empathy, I think, is sort of my favorite part to highlight because I think for the most part, we can all do perspective taking. We can say, okay, I understand that person's point of view, their perspective, why that might be a train of thought. But this next piece of cognitive empathy really requires us to put ourselves in someone's experience as if we were them. That's a little bit different, right? Because now I'm no longer Stevie thinking about how would I show up if I were in that situation? If I were going through betrayal, this is how I might show up. That's perspective taking. To put myself in someone else's shoes fully and to absorb their experience as my own means, what does it look like to be a 53-year-old woman that's going through betrayal, has been married 20 years, has been a stay-at-home mom to three kiddos, has not worked in those 20 years because she was working at home, and now is in the spot where, she's going through betrayal and doesn't know if she's going to stay in the marriage or not. And also doesn't know how to start over, doesn't know if she wants to start over. I'm going to go through that scenario very different than Stevie might go through that scenario, right? Because Stevie's going through different things than this person is. And that's a harder part of empathy to do because it really requires a lot of different pieces. And Wendy made a great point earlier when she was talking about the autism spectrum disorder. And those who have ASD actually struggle with this piece. If you get into autism research, it's called theory of mind, just for anyone who wants to really dig into it. It is a struggle and a deficit for those on the spectrum, but it's a really difficult thing, I think, to do in general because it requires us to step outside of our world and into someone else's world. Effective empathy is an automatic process that happens. So it's, if you're sitting with someone who's telling you a story and they tell you something that happened to them that just seems shocking, and you go, like, that's effective empathy, right? You just had a visceral response. If they're talking and they seem really sad and they start to tear up, and you notice you have tightness in your chest, a knot in your stomach, maybe a tear comes to your eye, that's effective empathy. And it doesn't always have to be exactly what they're experiencing that you're mirroring, but it's that you have a mood shift of some sort that happens when they're sharing with you and when you're experiencing their experience in that moment. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So I hear this from partners not infrequently. So they'll be like, he can tear up at a television commercial about something random, but when I share my heart and my pain, he walls up, he freezes, he can't
Yes.
show up. What the
Yeah.
heck? And they get so hurt
Mhm.
by this or frustrated, or he can, talk to his buddies and he seems to be really connected to them. But when I talk, he's a stone wall. What the
Mhm.
heck?
Yeah. Well, they have every right to feel that way, right? I think, especially if you can see that the empathy is there and it's not happening for you, it can feel very personal and very not just hurtful, but I think infuriating. I'd feel very angry in that situation. And so I think, this is a
Was that
great
cognitive
time.
empathy?
Yes. Good catch.
Sorry.
Yes. No, I'm glad you pointed that out. I think we can all practice empathy. So there you go. And think about, when the situation is about other people, it's much easier to be empathetic. When I'm the one that caused the hurt, it's a little bit harder.